Okay, so I've got the ceilings sorted out now, and it's actually really important to check what I was checking as well. When you have overlapping ceilings, you'll see that you can put the lights in, but then they'll usually get blocked by the other ceiling, and so you won't get any light when you render. So watch out for that. When you see that you've got a light and then it doesn't seem to be rendering or giving you any light in your render, that's one of the first things to check, that you may have extra ceilings. So again, now I've got the ceilings working properly, and I can tell that because when I select them I can see them clearly. And so now on the architecture tab I'm going to go to component, place component, and load family, and browse to find some light fixtures. So I'll start with the default library, just so I can show you some of the newer lights. So again, metric library, it's the default library, and then in the lighting folder, architectural. Do you know what MEP means? Mechanical engineering plumbing. Oh, sorry, electrical plumbing. In other words, things that engineers normally deal with. So it can be good to know because there are some good things in there. Just quickly show you. You've got lights and other things in there, and when you go to plumbing and electrical and all the other mechanical services, there are families that could be useful for you. But generally, you'll probably want to avoid those things at first. And even though they've got lights here, they're a bit too technical sometimes for what you need, even though some of them are actually the same as what I'm going to show you. Anyway, I just thought I'd point that out because you'll see that MEP come up a lot more with the new releases. They've done a lot to develop all the MEP things in the last few years, and I do use them a lot. But generally, when you see those two options, architectural and MEP, you want architectural. So I'll go there, and then we've got internal, external. We're doing interior design, so of course we want internal. And then we've got all these basic light types. So I just thought I'd point these out because they're good, and there are some things like the downlight spot that you'll still see useful. Downlight recessed cans, another one that's still useful. But then you've also got ones like this downlight round LED, which are good, but they work a bit differently to some of these other lights. I'll just show you some of the differences. So I'll start with this one though. So if you just wanted a fairly standard downlight, this downlight recessed can is probably a good one to start with. So with that, when you look in the type properties, you'll see, or the type selector, you'll see there are just a few types there that have the different sizes and then also the different voltages. Now, do you think the voltage matters? In electrical things, maybe it would, but for us, it doesn't matter. Okay, so voltage is something that doesn't affect the brightness of the light. It's again, an electrical thing. So that doesn't matter, really. When you see different voltages, don't worry about that. So all that matters really is the size for us. So it's got 150mm and 200mm, and they're both a bit daggy for me. And the big old, chunky incandescent downlights were like that, but we want LED looking, well, ones that look like the new LEDs. So straight away, before I even place it, I'm going to go to Edit Type, Duplicate, and put in my own size. Don't just accept the horrible stuff that Autodesk give you in the library, because they are super daggy. So I'm going to make it, say, 80mm, and I'm going to call it LED. And so hopefully you all know LEDs are the way to go with downlights these days. Don't ever use incandescent downlights. And so then we've got the recessing diameter there, 150, and of course I'm going to change that to 80. And then we've also got the height. So 200mm, 20 centimetres, that's really high, even for a downlight. So we don't need that height, so I'm going to take it down to 100. And that's it. And so now you can see I've got a much smaller, better looking light. And I might just place a few somewhere where we're definitely going to see them. So maybe over here near the chairs. And you can see there it's fairly easy to place them in line. But if you're wondering how to space them evenly, the best way sometimes is just to place them roughly and then come back and use the dimension tool, and then you'll see light families are going to have these alignment edges. So it's got a vertical and a horizontal, so I'm trying to find the vertical one, and I'm just going to go along and pick the other vertical alignment edges in each of those light families, and there's my last one, and then I'll just place the dimension to the side and use the equals option, which will be there. I can't see it. There it is. It's just inside the wall. So to make it easier for you to see, I'll press escape twice and then select the dimension again and just drag that down, and then it's easy to see the equals option. I'll click on that, and now my lights are all spaced evenly. Yep. Oh yes, great. And then with that constraint, if I select any of those lights, so I'll just make sure I get one of the lights. Oops, that's the ceiling. Oops. If I use tab, and then there we go. Then I can select the light. So if I move one of those lights, it's going to keep the equal spacing. So now, what I really recommend when you're starting to work with lighting for rendering is that you test it as you go. So there's nothing worse than seeing people put in 1,000 lights and place them all beautifully, and then realise afterwards that none of them are actually giving any light in the render, or they're giving way too much light and difficult to control. So, I'm going to go and make a camera view, just up here on the quick access toolbar, or you can go to the view tab and click there again to get the camera. I'll just place it over near the corner here, and then bring it across to look towards my furniture. And good chance just to go over some of the view controls. I think we've looked at this a little bit, but just remember with cameras, it's really helpful to use the navigation wheel to adjust the camera. So over here on the right, you've got the navigation bar and that navigation wheel. If you click on the little down arrow there, you can make sure it's got the full navigation wheel. And so then I'll click on the wheel and use pan, so you just click and drag to use any of these options. There we go. And close that, get rid of this horrible column, and maybe expand the sides of the views just to get a wider field of view. And then click on the teapot to render. So you can, on the view tab, do the same thing. And then to see the effect of the lights, I'm going to change the lighting scheme to interior artificial only. And then just hit render. Okay, so it might look very dim, but that's normal, and what you should expect, right? Because what you then usually need to do, especially when you use artificial only, is adjust the exposure. So when you click adjust exposure, then you can just drag this slider, in this case to the left, to make it brighter. Click apply, left again, apply, and there we are. So it's a very hard edge light at the moment, so I'm going to click OK. Close this, and let's have a look at some of the light properties that we can use to adjust that. So I'll just select one of those lights, go to edit type, and I'm going to scroll down, and you can see then we've got these different values. So we've got the field angle and the beam angle. So the field angle is the maximum extent of the light, so that's the outside of the cone, if you like. So I'm going to bring that down and make it, let's say, 60. And then the beam angle is the minimum. So it's not the minimum, it's the area where the light is the brightest. So I'm going to make that bigger. I'm going to make it 50. And in fact, so I'm going to make the field angle a bit higher, make it 70. And so that should be not 550, that's better. So now I should get a soft edge to the light. With this rendering program with ART, it's much harder to control than it used to be. Not as good basically, but it still should soften that a bit. Still a bit hard. I'm going to stop that. And I'm just going to show you in the light family. So I'm going to select that light and go to Edit Family, just so you can see those angles without me having to render. So again, that's the inner part of the light there. That was the beam angle. And then the field angle is the outer part. And then so looking at it here, we've got, again, that's 30, so if we make that, might even bring that down. And then again, so make that say 10. And then this one, yeah, maybe 70 or so. Oops. Right, so that should give us a softer edge to the light. So if I go back, now there's no point changing in the family, by the way, right, because the setting needs to be done in the project. So I'm just going to go to the File menu and Close, and then say no, I don't want to save any changes in this file, because the file is just with the light. So again, in the project file, now I can go to Edit Type, and I'll bring the beam angle down, let's try 10. And hopefully then I'll get a soft edge. I don't really like hard edge lights unless it's for spotlighting in a theatre or something. There we go, that's much nicer. Yeah, so you can experiment with that, so you can keep going. So I'll just go back, and you might still want to adjust it, so maybe 17 or something. So when you've only got a few, yeah, that's better. So when you've only got a few lights, it's going to render much faster as well. So it's much easier to test things out. So I'll go and place some other lights just to show you some different settings in the different kinds of lights as well. So again, back to Architecture, Component, Load Family. Right, so that's the Downlight Recessed Cam. Then you've got Downlight Spot. So I'll put that on near this wall. See why in a second. So yeah, will do. Unfortunately, with this light, space doesn't work to rotate it, like it does with a lot of families. So you have to place them first, and then come back and use rotate to change the angle. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to rotate it so that it's got that grill facing in the direction I want the light to be pointing. So back into my 3D view. It's going to quickly show you a really handy little shortcut. So I'm going to select the chair there, and then maybe, sorry, just the curtain wall. You'll see why in a second. So I've just used Control to select those two things. So I've got this curtain wall and the chair. And now I'm going to click on this button here, Selection Box. So what Selection Box does is it sets a section box. I know the two terms sound similar, but they're slightly different. So Selection Box, again, is making a section box from my selection. Right, so you can see there, giving me a nice view that is going around the things I selected, the chair and the wall. But what I wanted was to be able to see this wall here. I didn't select that wall though because it was a bit bigger than the selection I wanted. So again, so here I've got my section box, and I can still adjust it by selecting it and bring that out just to see a bit more. So now I'm going to rename this view 3D with the default name. I'm just going to rename, and we'll call it section box, SB1 or something. So there's just a view for me to work in. So now, if I want to get the default view back, I can just click on the house, and that gives me a view with that default name again. But I've got a section box view there, and I want that just so that I can put something on this wall. So there's my light, which I'm going to come back to in a second, but so that the light's pointing at something, I just want to put something on this wall. So do you know how to put images on walls and other things.
Place it on there.
Yeah. Exactly, decal, that's right, yep, decal, that's right, yep, that's it, it's good, I see, no decals, great, excellent. Yep, so decals, you know, decal just means sticker, so that's what it is. If you go to the Insert tab, you've got decals there, place decal, and click the new button first time, and so let's call it painting, and then go and browse and find one of the images I've got on the P drive, design, material images and paintings. I've got some of the paintings that I like, and so let's just choose. Okay, so I'm just going to place that on the wall, and yeah. So just so that I've got something to aim at. Right. So now I'm going to go back to the ceiling plan, again just to make sure you know that the light is there pointing towards that wall where the painting is. And so now I might go back to my perspective, and I'm just going to use the navigation wheel again and maybe bring that around, change the direction with look. Maybe you can just walk forward a little bit and then bring that around a bit more, just so we can see this new light. So at the moment, well, I'll just render so you can see what it's doing, and it's pointing down, essentially. You can probably tell from the way it looks on the ceiling there. So I want this to be at an angle. Okay, so to change it so that it's pointing towards that picture, we'll close this, select the light, and you'll see these spotlights actually have a tilt angle built in. So if I change it to say 60-degree tilt, you can see the angle straight away. Oh, just in the type selector. Here you've got these different preset tilts. So 60 and 75. You can put in any angle you like. If you go to Edit Type, you can see there it's got the tilt angle here that you can just change to any angle. But I'm happy with 60. And so again, if I go to Render, this time we'll see it pointing towards the picture. Yep, but too bright. Yep. So it's a good chance to look at the last property I'll show you with lights. Well, there's really two things together: the colour and the temperature. Oh, sorry, the temperature and the brightness. Colour and temperature are the same thing. So with that light, if I go Edit Type, scroll down. So we've been looking at the angles. So we've got the spot angle, beam angle, and then the tilt angle. But then most of the other settings relate to the light that's being emitted. So the first one, light loss factor, you can just leave. Generally, just don't touch that one. If you do, you're getting into physics and it gets pretty complicated, and again, you normally don't need to use that. But it's a mistake people often make. They'll look at this and see dimmer and think that's what you use to control the brightness of the light. But it's actually better to use the next one, which is the initial intensity. So initial intensity has different ways of setting the brightness, and this again goes all back to the physics of light. You don't need to know all of that, and you definitely don't need to know the electrical options. So that means once you understand that, you can avoid that first method. Right? But it's good maybe to know about this because when you go and buy light bulbs yourselves, you might have wondered why different wattages have different brightnesses. And in the old days, when it used to just be a wattage, when you buy a light bulb and it had so many watts on it, it was very difficult to know how bright it was just by looking at the wattage. Now they tend to give you the lumens, right? And if you've wondered why they have the new lumens on light bulbs, it's because the older lights, like the older incandescents and even the older fluoros, were really inefficient. And so a 100-watt incandescent bulb is about as bright as a 20-watt compact fluorescent. And that's why you have to use the efficiency to go with the wattage to use that, that method. So it's much better to use a single value, of course, and simpler. So the best one is luminous flux, but the other one, luminous intensity, still can be useful as well, and probably the easier one to understand at first. So have you seen any of these units before, lumens or candelas? So the bottom one, candelas, is, again, probably the easiest to understand because a candela is pretty much the brightness of a candle. So this light, in theory, is about the brightness of 10,000 candles. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, man-made light sources. It is. It's the old imperial measurement. So the new way is lumens. Lumens are just a metric candle. And they're about a third the brightness of, sorry, they're 3 times the brightness of a candela. Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so luminous flux is probably the best option. And again, just try and get used to using lumens. And you'll see this when you go and buy light bulbs. They'll usually have the brightness in lumens. So I want this to be much less bright, so I'm going to make that 800 lumens. So maybe I'll just render with that and I'll come back to the temperature. But you can see already, much better. Oh yeah, that's right, yep. All these things that will be so hard if you had to draw it. So, okay, so then just going to the final one that's actually really important, but people often don't touch it or don't spend enough time looking at it. So the final thing with lights is the colour or the temperature, same thing. Now I don't want to go too much into the physics, but you need to know that not all colours can be done this way. So, do you have an idea what colour range you tend to work with lights?
Is it yellow?
Yep. Yellow and so? Pretty much, that's right, yeah, good, that's right, that's it, that's how you should be thinking. So orange or yellow to blue is the range, so warm or cool is often the way they're described. And it makes a huge difference to the way the lights look. So a warm light is a low temperature, and that would be, say, again, incandescent. You can see here the effect, that really orange sort of look. And then a cool light is a higher temperature. So xenon is a high temperature one, and you can see there it's closer to white, but it is a little bit blue. And if we go really high, if I just bring this up to, let's say, 9,000, then you can definitely see the blue there.
So in some of the kitchens where I used to work,
Yep.
they have like a warm light,
Yeah.
and they have something that imitated natural light.
Well, natural light is a funny one because there's no such thing, but normally when people say natural light, they mean neutral, maybe daylight, like midday daylight, but even daylight changes throughout the day. So early in the day, it's warm, so sunrise and sunset, it's warm, and then by midday, it becomes a lot cooler. So they've got these reference whites, so D50 is daylight earlier in the day, and D65 is midday daylight, essentially. And yeah, so you can mix them. You've got to be careful when you mix warm and cool light. It can look a bit weird sometimes, but if you get it right, it's great. And yeah, otherwise you can go with one or the other. Sometimes you want the really warm light, and in other cases you want cool light. Cool was really in for a long time, but now it's not so much. And neutral as well. Sometimes you just want to go neutral, and that's why you've got that neutral range, which is around 5,000, but well, sort of high 4s up to 6,000 even is still in that neutral range. So here if we go fluorescent daylight, I bet you that'll be too warm. Oh no, that's cool. Names are funny. Light white, what am I saying that is? That's a warm one. Warm white, that's really warm. Cool white, well see there, cool white is not that cool. But that's from the fluorescent, which, well, fluorescents were always really cool, but this is, again, this is what they've called them. But as long as you've got an idea of the temperature range, then you can adjust the colour of your lights from that, in that warm to cool range. But then you can get other colours using filters or gels. So that's coloured glass that they stick over the top of the light.
So where was that under?
Oh, so just below that. So you've got the filter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's not changing the temperature of the light to achieve a different colour. It's just, again, sticking glass or some other coloured gel over the light fitting to get that colour. And that could be a good option too. But otherwise that's it. So I'll just get the end of this now, and you might see a little difference in the colour. You generally don't want to mix them too much, so if you've got lots of really obviously warm lights and then obviously cool lights, it can look really weird. But here you can see I'd get away with it. This one's definitely warmer than this one on the left, but that's probably not too bad. So those settings will come up for a lot of lights, but not all of them are going to have the angles. So just going back again to component, light family, and so you've got pendant lights. So I'll just get a pendant light. Pendant lights can be a bit hard to work with as well. I'll just show you some. So there's a pendant light. So in other words, just hangs like a pendant from the ceiling. So another ceiling hosted light still. And you'll see those don't have the angles because they're not focused lights like downlights. So downlights, if you go and look at the family, again they have that cone of light that's coming from a light source to a target. In other words, they're directional. Whereas pendant lights, if you look at that family, they're not directional. Right, so here it's got this hemispherical light source, and it just lights evenly in that that hemisphere or 180 degrees range. There are other distributions as well, but those are the main ones. Have you done much technical studies of lighting in other subjects? No? No. Okay, so I won't get into web yet, but there is another distribution, but we'll look at that later. And so, I'll just show you though, when you're working with pendants even, without getting into web, again the distribution is quite different to directional lights. So again, the best tip I can give you there is trial and error. Put them in and render them before you go too far. And again, I see so many people put a lot of lights in and then really struggle just to work with the basic settings, because when you put more lights, it takes much longer to render and you can't test things out as easily. And with pendant lights, the main issue you'll have is things like this, where you get blooms on surfaces that you're too close to. Here it's not too bad because I don't have too many lights, but if there were too many lights there, that would just be a big white blob on the ceiling. And you can see already the light fixture itself looks pretty terrible because it's too bright. So the final thing I'll just show you with lights, also there's two more things. Firstly, we're just going to look at the material. So I'll go to Edit Type, and we've got the mount material, which is the chrome, and then the pendant material, which is that glowing glass. And I think it's far too bright. So here we are. So looking at the material, then you can see something that's actually common to a lot of rendering programs these days. The fact that you have materials that act as lights. Okay, so this material does provide light in the scene. So as well as the light source itself, this material is giving us light, and it's also making that glass glow. So I'm going to take this right down 1300, as you probably saw with the lumens I said before. This is in lumens. That's very bright. I'm going to make it 300. And then just test it out. Good render. And you can see now it's already slowing down a little bit, but there we are. So it's a little bit better, but still maybe a bit too bright. Okay, so I'll go back and again, edit type, find the material, browse, appearance, and take it down even further. So I'll try 100. And the key with these things is to avoid these extremes of too bright or, of course, too dark. And there we are. So now we can see a bit of definition in that light fixture, and it's looking much better. Right, so, okay, so then the final thing I want to show you for now with lighting, there are plenty of other light families you can look at in the library, but I just want to point out one of the most useful. I'll just quickly touch on the other hosted lights. So you've got wall lights. Now this one, there's only one wall lamp there by the look of it. Oh no, here we go, there's the sconces. So you've got the sconces, there are wall lights as well. And there are floor lights. Now these floor lights are pretty ordinary, they're just lamps. But if you go into the main library on the P drive, in the lighting fixtures folder there are floor lights that are recessed into the floor. Where? Here we are, floor light. So that's a recessed floor light, and they can be really useful. They look great. And then the sconces as well here. There'll be a few more. How can I see them? Oh, here we are. So there's some more sconces there. There we are. Okay, so they're of course wall lights. So again, you can just place those from the library, but they need to go onto the thing that's hosting them. So again, sconces need to go onto walls. Floor lights, of course, need to go into floors. And so they're all hosted lights. But then sometimes you just want to have a light that's floating in space that doesn't need to be hosted by something else, that can just be by itself. When you don't have enough light in your scene and you don't want to have it necessarily attached to a ceiling or a floor or a wall. And so for that, you've got this one called Studio Light. There it is, M Studio Light, which is a big floating ball of light. I'll click on that. And I'm just going to click to place that roughly in the middle of this space over here. And you can see it's telling me none of the objects were visible in the view. So to find it, I'm now going to go to this section. And there's my light. There's my Studio Light. So the reason I couldn't see it in the floor plan was because it's too high. But I can adjust the height there, and I'll just bring it down a bit so it's closer to the floor. So I'm now back in the ground floor plan. I still can't see it. Again, because it's maybe still a little bit too high. So what else do you think you could do maybe to make that light show in the floor plan? If you're thinking about the view settings I showed you earlier for the ceiling plan. Remember, you can adjust the cut plane height. So if you look at your view range, for this plan view, I'll find the view range, click edit there, and you can see there the cut plane's just at 1200. So I'll bring it up to 1500. And then now I can see my light because the cut plane, if you look at the section, right, so the cut plane's 1500, which is about there. So that just picks up the light.
The cut plane, that means 1500 light off the floor?
Exactly, that's right. So it's cutting through at about this height through everything. And as long as it's touching the light, then you'll see it. So otherwise though, those studio lights work a lot like the other lights I've shown you. So you've got the same settings for the brightness, And here, again, so initial intensity is your brightness setting, remember? So if you click there, again, luminous flux is the best way to set the brightness. And you think 7,000 is a good value for a light? 7,000 lumens?
That's right.
That's very bright.
So 700.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. That's good, yeah. So, yeah, so if you saw the settings I was using before, they were closer to 1,000. So, yeah, so 700 maybe is good. That's a good idea. So, okay, so going back, and I'll just go back to the camera view that I had and bring that around so that you can see the area where this new light is. So there's my studio light. So no other lights in that area, in that space. But I can still render it now and see something. So let's fix this up. There we are. Okay, now, you've got to think about what we're seeing there. We're not seeing the light source. Well, sorry, we're not seeing it directly. What we're seeing is the reflections of it. And that's because my wall surface has a reflective material. So I might just go back and you can see then how materials and lights do interact quite a bit. In fact, you only see light. I know you think you see light, but you don't see light. You see the reflections of materials. You never see the light directly. And so here, again, that's a very reflective surface, semi-gloss. I'll just go down and finish. And then we probably won't see any reflections of the light. It's one of those annoying bugs. You'll notice this. There'll be times when the button for rendering will disappear from this toolbar down here. It's a bug. It should be there, but it's just one of those things. It does sometimes vanish, but if you close the view and open it again, it'll come back. The teapot. Yeah. Yeah, it's an old Autodesk thing. There's a reason, but I'll go into it later. So there we are. So now we can see the effect of the light, but not the reflections of the light source itself so much. But so studio lights can be a really useful thing just to get some light into your scenes without having to worry about having particular light fixtures. But you can of course use them together. There's nothing to stop you keeping a studio light there just to get some extra brightness and having some lights just like the ones I placed earlier. So I'll go back and put some of the, the 80mm LEDs in again, maybe around these surfaces. And put a bit of ceiling there, that's no problem. And it's an old cheat in most 3D rendering from, the past, the early days of, computer-generated 3D rendering. There was a lot of extra lighting added to simulate bounced lighting and things like that. And it's still done a lot. If you look at the way they do Pixar and all the 3D movies, there's a lot of that approach to lighting. And it's more in the programs we use though, where you tend to try and get as much as you can with the light fixtures that you want for your design, but there still are going to be times when that won't give you enough light for the look you want in your render, and so essentially you cheat and you put studio lights in just to balance or add more lighting in certain areas. So that's probably plenty to get you going with lighting. And don't be afraid to download light families from places like Revit City. They're one of the better places for light families actually. BIM Objects has them as well, but they're harder to work with. And again, don't forget the Revit Lovely folder on the P drive, because it's got a lot of lights that I've made, and I've done a lot of 3D rendering over the years, so I've made lots of lights that are really useful for particular types of rendering that you need, especially just quickly show you. So I've got some downlights there that work a little bit better than the default ones, and I've got some unhosted lights that have fixtures, which I'll maybe go further into later. But if you need a floating light that still has a fixture, there are some options there, like this square one. Maybe I will just load that one actually, because that's a really handy one. So here again, load family, and in here, where is it? Square. There we go, square unhosted downlight. So this is a light that looks like a ceiling light, but it doesn't need a ceiling. So maybe out here, so if I wanted to have a light under the awning, for example, the awning technically isn't a ceiling, so you can't put ceiling lights there. No, it won't let you. But you can put this light I've made, right, and it looks like a ceiling light. It's attached to the awning. You can adjust the height, but I won't worry about that now. And of course it renders with light. So there it is, and you can adjust the size and all the other things. But then if we bring that around and bring it back, yeah. And you know, you can probably tell already, there aren't a huge, there aren't a huge number of options that you need to set up for lights. Often you're just adjusting a few of these settings, like the brightness that I'm working with now. God, that's really bright. I don't know what I was thinking there. But then it's just a lot of experimentation, and subtle changes will make a difference. And there are lots of designers I know who spend, you know, their whole lives experimenting with and learning about lighting, and it's a real specialty. And it's an amazing thing what you can do with light. I think sometimes people try to do too much with geometry, or even too much with materials, when at the end of the day you only see these things with your lights. And then lighting design is a really important thing in interiors. And once you can get them working at a basic level, then it is just a little bit, you know, tweaking and fine adjustments to make it look good. So I'll give you some time to try those things, and you can put lights in at any point, and then keep working on the rest of your design and get these sort of preliminary renders set up, which is what you need for the assignment, but I'm sure it's going to help you with your other subjects as well.